right, everybody. Well, welcome back to Legal Talk. Man, I'm sure I'm excited, happy today to have everybody out there in the audience with us. I'm so happy that you stuck around through that wonderful commercial break. I really hope that you were able to get the warm or cold beverage of your choice and you're able to, get comfortable and settle in because I got another thing to talk about for you today. Now, this is another question, like I said before. If you got tax questions you want to, ask me, you can email me. My email, by the way, jmitchell@cctaxlaw.com. And you can email me your questions, and I'll either do one of three things. I'll either call you up and we'll chat a little bit on the phone about it, or I might send you an email. Or if it's a question that I think is a good fit for the show, I will absolutely make a segment out of it, just like I did this, because I got this question just about, I'm going to say 3 or 4 days ago as I record this. So this is hot off the presses, right? You see, I've got it written down here. The paper's hot, right? It's hot off the press. So I got this right here, and I'm going to answer the question live on the show for that person that kindly sent me this question, right? So the question goes like this. I am a minister. So welcome, minister. Thanks for watching us. So I'm a minister. I get a salary and a housing allowance. Is the housing allowance considered income, and how is it reported? Right. So that's going to be an interesting. Now, I had not known this a long time ago, and I don't do a lot of minister tax returns. I don't do a lot of tax returns at all, actually, but I do know, the basics of it. And the basics of it is this. A lot of times, a minister, a pastor, a reverend, a priest, whatever you want to call it, right? Clergy. That's the nice, inclusive, terminology that we use for all of this, right? So if you're a member of the clergy and you've got a congregation, you got yourself a church, a little church, or maybe a big church, and they are paying you. It's very common amongst the clergy to get paid a salary, and then that salary also, apart from your regular salary, you'll get some kind of a stipend, some kind of a housing allowance, right? That can take the different forms, right? That can either be a house that the church owns and they're allowing you to stay there, or that can be rent. So you rent a place and they pay for it. So it can be either one of those. But you can get that housing allowance apart from your salary. And the way that's handled is that actually people think of taxes, they think of one big number, but actually taxes can be broken down into different kinds of taxes. So you got your federal income tax on one hand, and then on the other hand, you got your Social Security and Medicare, what they call FICA, right? So that's all together, that's Social Security and Medicare, that's called FICA. So the way that housing allowance works, let's say you live in a house and the church pays for that, and the church pays, let's say, $2,000 a month. So they give you, let's say, $3,000 a month as a salary, and they pay an extra 2,000 for your housing, right? So they pay for your housing. So the way that works is when you're a pastor and you get a W-2 at the end of the year, those numbers are going to be separated. It's going to be broken down because box one of the W-2 is going to be what you pay federal income tax on, and that's just your salary. Then apart from that, it's going to be whatever was spent on housing. So $2,000 a month times 12 months, 24,000. You do not pay federal income tax on that. Okay, but you do have to pay Social Security and Medicare. So that's the FICA tax, and that's going to be 6.42, I think it is, if my mathematics are not failing me right now, but it's over between 6.5%, right? And so that you're going to have to pay taxes on Social Security. All right. So that's the way that works when you're a minister and you got housing. So we talked a little bit about the churches renting you a place and paying your rent, whatever that can be. Now, what if you just get a lump sum of money, $5,000 a month, and you have to pay rent out of that. Well, you can go back and do that on your tax return. So you're going to have to break that out and call it housing allowance and make adjustments on the return. That can be, and also if the church owns a house that they just allow you to live in, you're supposed to claim the fair market value. So, what would the fair value of that rent be if you were renting a house, right? So, got to calculate that, and then you got to say, well, that's not subject to income tax, but it is subject to Social Security. So, your tax person, whoever that may be, is going to have to figure that out. But long story short, if you're in the clergy, then your housing allowance or money that you spent on housing, sometimes they call it parsonage allowance, whatever it is, whatever you live to, whatever it costs you to keep that roof over your head, right? That is going to be not subject to federal income tax. Now, there's some caveats to that, and again, I kind of know these, but I got my notes here just so that we don't run afoul and miss anything. So the amount cannot be an amount that's more than is reasonable, right? So let's say you're in a kind of a upscale church, right? And you get compensated $100,000 a year, right? Let's say you cannot say that 90,000 of that is housing allowance and 10,000 is your salary because it's got to be reasonable. If you get audited by the IRS, they're going to, shall we say, call you out on that, right? That's not going to fly because it's got to be a reasonable amount. Usually, a reasonable amount is, 20%, 25, maybe as much as 30%. It depends. Facts and circumstances depend, right? But that's so the amount that you are claiming as a housing allowance and not paying federal taxes on it, you got to divide it up in a way that's reasonable. It's got to make sense. It's got to be fair, right? You can't say I've got this 2, 3 bedroom home in most parts of the country. You can't say I got this 3 bedroom home. I make $10,000 a month. Oh, by the way, 9,000 of that is housing expense. You can't do that, right? So that's one thing. So it can't be more than reasonable. And also, whatever you receive has got to be also spent within that year. So you can't have the church give you a W-2 and put X amount housing allowance, and you can't just build that up in the bank and hang on to it. You got to show if you're audited that whatever amount we're calling housing allowance, that's the amount that you actually spent. It's going to match up, right? My rent is 2,000 a month. The church gave me 2,000 a month. 2,000 minus 2,000, 0. And so you have spent all of your money every month. All of the housing allowance money was actually spent on housing. And it doesn't have to be rent, by the way. It could be, there's other things. It could be some, I forget, like HOA fees are probably in there. I know utilities can be in there. So you got a little bit of wiggle room, but whatever you are getting, it's got to be reasonable and it's got to be spent in that year that it was received. And the amount has to be designated in advance. And a lot of times I've seen churches and pastors get caught up on this. So there should be, let's say, in November or December of the year, a board meeting or whatever, whoever's the governing body of the church need to get together, maybe the whole congregation, they get together and they say, we're going to allow X amount housing expense for the pastor, right? And that should really be documented in board meetings or whatever. So meeting minutes, and so it should be designated, and that's about it. I already talked about. That's the last point I have here on the paper. If it's in kind, you can deduct the fair rental value. So that's the way that works. If there are pastors out there and you're wondering what to do, maybe you're brand new and you wonder, oh, can I deduct this? Is it taxable? Is it not taxable? What's going on with that? That is the skinny, right? That's the very bare bones about how ministers, pastors, whatever, clergy, how they pay their taxes. Housing allowance is generally free from federal income tax. So that question came in about 3 or 4 days ago, and I appreciate it. Thank you for the minister that's out there watching our show. As I'm sure I hope you're not the only one, but thanks for sending that question in. And again, this is Legal Talk. My name is John Mitchell, host of the show, and we are happy to have you with us. Please stick around because we're going to go for some more commercials, and then we will be right back after that. So stick with us.